trying to quickly categorize every single instrument is kind of ridiculous because instruments can be played in so many different ways and context determines a lot too. But I'm going to do it anyway. I think it's kind of like when you join a group of people, like if you join a church and suddenly there's all these people, you're the new person, it's easy for everyone to get to know you. You have to get to know everyone at once. And learning to write for orchestra is being that new person, and you have to get to know all the instruments at once. And at first you're writing for them and they just all kind of, some of them just all blend together in your head and you can't keep them separate. You don't know what to do with them. You forget who they are and what they're like. But over time, you kind of get to know them one at a time organically as things come up, and you start to get to know them, and then as you mature, you get to know more aspects of their character, different ways they can be used, and maybe your relationship with them changes too. One you used to always joke around with, and now you realize it has a serious side too. So these are just today my quick impressions for how I'm thinking of all the orchestral instruments. So, woodwinds, piccolo. There's something lonely, or maybe I should say very independent about the piccolo. It's by itself and it likes it that way. Flute. I know flutes can be aggressive, but they blend so well and they do soft so beautifully. To me, they tend to be delicate. In a way, they're more emotional than strings, at least for more intimate personal emotions. Oboe. Oboe is stunningly beautiful, but it always has a bit of distance. It's so elegant. It feels a little bit, it's not cold, it's just not quite as approachable and personable as, say, clarinet. Clarinet very much just feels to me like someone who's easy to get along with. Or even... the clarinet just feels casual. Bassoon. Man, I just love bassoon. It has that dark quality. It can feel kind of distant, it can feel foreign, but it also is just so expressive and beautiful at the same time. I don't know, I'm a huge fan of bassoon lately. French horn. I think this one is... I mean, French horns are epic. They can do the soft epic and they can do the loud epic, but they're always epic. If you know some way that French horns can be not epic, post a link to an example. Trumpets. They're very responsible and kind of, I mean, they can joke a little bit, but it's always with a serious undertone. Obviously, they have the military association, but I think it's when you realize what trumpets sound like when they're playing at soft dynamics. There's something so caring and gentle about that, but it's like someone who's very strong being very gentle with you. Trombones. My trombone samples, not super happy with. Yeah, they just sound bad. I need to find better trombones. So honestly, I don't use them very much, but I think it's the samples, not the real instrument. I mean, trombone can do... See, because trombones can do what French horns can do very well in a mix, which is they can still play a lower brass line. French horns, with their conical bore, they have that beautiful wide sound, but if they have something quickly moving, it's really hard for them to project through a mix or through an orchestration, especially at medium dynamics. Tuba. Oh gosh, tuba. Tuba is like bassoon. It's a miracle that no one is aware of. So warm, so big, and because it has so little upper end, it just feels so distant too. It's just this shadow. It's the shadow of a giant. I don't know. Percussion! Cymbals. What are cymbals? Woo! Yeah, I mean, for transitions and emphasizing things, very cool. They're punctuation marks. Snare drum. Well, that's without the snare on. There's with the snare. I mean, there's the military, right? Like, you can't get away from that for a snare drum. And it's really hard to use snare drum without it sounding instantly military. But I think snare drum just, if you had a quiet, like, you can add a lot of energy even at quiet levels because it's so precise. Bass drum. It's fate. Like, when the bass drum strikes, nothing can be bigger than that. So, I think bass drum can easily be overused. Like, once per hour is maybe enough. I love bass drum, actually, but I hate to make any of these statements because I know they're only true for me as in the way that I write music today. And next week or next month, my relationships with them will change, but this is today. Tam-tam. Oh my gosh, yes. It's like a cymbal crash, but better. The way that it blooms into the sound, it just takes you into a new place. Timpani, it's theatrical. It's always so melodramatic. A lot of noise in those samples. But like, all you need is one soft timpani strike under something and instantly the whole thing just sounds dramatic. Love timpani. Strings. Now strings, it's hard to give each string section its own character because the strength of the string family is in their uniformity. You can have a scale running across all four from basses all the way up to violins, and you can barely hear when it switches from one to another instrument. Their strength is that they don't have characters individually. And also, if I had to describe the character of strings as a whole, this is lame, but I would say they are orchestral. In fact, if you think about how to define an orchestra, you can take out all the other instruments, just leave the strings, and it's called a string orchestra. You leave all the other instruments and take out the strings, and it's no longer an orchestra. It's called a wind ensemble. So I think strings really are the defining parameter of orchestral music. So if you think orchestral, it's going to need strings. I mean, violins, obviously very nimble, very expressive, great for kind of the go-to for melodies. But they have a lightness to them. They can be forward. They can be a little harsh, too, depending on how they're played, especially if they're playing a little closer to the bridge, and they can just be kind of biting. Violas. Now, violas, oh my gosh, I love violas. If you want to know the character of violas, listen to Fauré's Requiem, because he writes for strings, but he just omits violins entirely. Violas are the highest ones he uses. And it gives the whole thing this slightly smokier, foggier kind of moodier. I think violins are just, or violas are moody violins. Cellos, they are cellos. They're the heart of the orchestra. There's no denying it. Always beautiful. Cellos, they're just always beautiful. And if they're playing staccato notes, actually, 2, 3, 4. There we go. They're the ones that provide all of the energy. The basses might fill in the low end, and then you add more motion in the other ones. But that bite, that that always comes from the cellos. And we have double bass. Well, sorry. Now, basses are interesting because you think of them as a low instrument, but compared to the tuba, they have that really, you can really hear the rosin on the strings, so they get a lot of overtones. It really helps you to hear what the bass notes are in a louder part of the composition, but if you have something soft, they're not always the ones I go to. Even though they can do dynamics, even at soft dynamics, they still have a lot. They still have so much high frequency sound. So basses are good for when you want to add weight underneath the cellos, because then the cellos, when you have them in octaves with the cellos, they do add weight to the cellos, and the cellos add clarity to the basses, but I think the cellos also kind of mask that raspiness of the basses, which sometimes you might want, but often it can stand out awkwardly if you're not careful about what you write right above them. But in a louder section, they'll be able to give a lot of power and sustain to that bass without being so boomy that they sort of rumble over everything else. That's how I use basses. Hope this was interesting. And I'd love to hear how you use instruments. In particular, tell me, what instrument are you in love with right now? Because that's always fun. For me, it's bassoon, but it will change. See you soon.